Hey guys, so today I'm doing a video and that is the difference between conflict and resolution and how to pick up on conflict, how to pick up on toxic dynamics, and how to have resolution, whether you're in a friendship, a family, or whether you want to build an intentional community where else you can get to some active actions that you can take near the end. So, first things first is I want to express what the objective truth is when it comes to conflict and when it comes to how the universe sees conflict. So, from the universe's perspective, there is no right and wrong. There is no bad or good or evil, right? All the universe sees and all the universe experiences from conflict is that two people are both farther away from their truth, farther away from their higher self, farther away from love, and that they're in a right versus wrong dynamic. That being said, there is still an objective truth to the roles that people play when it comes to conflict. So there are roles like being a codependent, being a narcissist, there are roles being the perpetrator, being the victim. Now, no matter which roles you fit into, it doesn't make one person more wrong or one person more right. But there is a truth that if someone's taking the perpetrator role and someone's taking the victim role, that even though they're both on the same vibrational level of pain, they both are valid in their feelings and their pain and their trauma, there is one person that has chosen to be more damaging to the other, to have a more impact on the other person, and the person that's in the victim role has chosen to receive that kind of damage towards them, to receive this kind of toxicity towards them, and there isn't more validity in one or the other, and they're both on the same vibration of powerlessness to be in that circumstance. The truth is that the perpetrator has been the victim and has experienced trauma that is super damaging in their life, and that this person that's in the victim role is somehow triggering that trauma for them. The truth is also that the person that's in the victim role is also experiencing that level of trauma, has also had that past level of trauma. And the perpetrator is a perfect trigger for the abuse that they went through in their childhood. So, the difference between conflict and resolution is conflict is when two parties are unprepared to see the other person's perspective and are unprepared to see the other person's truth and want to continue being at odds or at opposition with one another. Resolution is when, despite the conflict, despite the odds, that both parties are prepared to put aside their differences and come to some common ground in order to make changes moving forward that affect both parties positively. Now, let's get into some examples of what conflict is really about and what the most common denominator is when it comes to someone who wants to be in conflict. What are some toxic dynamics and control dramas that we're going to see when someone is in conflict mode? Conflict is about opposition. It is about I am wrong or I am right. It is about you are wrong or you are right, right? And it's not coming from a place of love and understanding, and it's not coming from a place of being open towards the other person, being loving towards the other person, considering them and working together no matter who did what, right? So we're going to talk about what this wrong versus right ego can kind of do and how it can be really toxic and damaging in relationships. And then we're going to give some examples of how to be in unity consciousness and create resolution. So one way that people can really be in I'm right and you're wrong is when they're using a spiritual ego, when they consider themselves to be a spiritual teacher, when they consider themselves to be psychic or a healer, or that they have something that makes them superior in the way of and better than you, and in the way of, well, yeah, I am right in this scenario, and there's nothing you can say to prove me otherwise, right? So the spiritual teacher dynamic is all about someone using spirituality and dynamics to label and justify things and to make the other person wrong. And they're doing it not from a place of actual spiritual awareness, but they're doing it as a way to shame the other person for their level of consciousness, to say I'm superior because I'm more spiritual than you, or to shame them and put them into an inferior place of you're not spiritual enough. So whenever anyone is using spiritual truths against you in a conflict, you have to absolutely see if they're genuinely looking to find a truth towards resolution, and if they're genuinely, in a loving way, trying to see the reality in the situation, or if they're using these things to justify and make themselves and their subjective point of view more right against yours. Another really toxic dynamic is when people use their morals as a way to justify how they've acted, right? When they're saying that this is my moral value, and so I am completely, I'm allowed to make that value, I'm allowed to make that choice, and so I don't really care how you feel about it, right? Everybody gets to have morals in a situation, and everybody gets to make their own choices. But just because you have a moral feeling about something, or you value something, and you're allowed to make certain actions or choices, does not mean that you can't have an impact on others, and does not mean that there isn't truth outside of your moral compass. Another really toxic dynamic that I've seen: when you're in spiritual teacher mode and you're using your spiritual ego, you might be putting people down because they're not healed enough. You might be saying that you're not conscious, you're not being conscious, and shaming them for them not seeing some spiritual belief or some dynamic. Now, it is very possible to have spiritual awareness when it comes to conflict, and it's very possible to see a dynamic of the other person and point it out, but we have to be really careful about why we're creating these assumptions and why we're using spirituality in this situation. Is it truly to see all perspectives, and is it truly to bring truth and reality and consciousness, or are you using spiritual truths and are you using dynamics to justify and label your point of view, your subjectivity in the situation? So if somebody is using spiritual truths to put the other person down, or if somebody is not mutable, is not at all willing to open their perspective, then we need to really, really, really see that as a power play of superiority, where the other person is really using spirituality to damage the other person, to say that you're not spiritual and that you're not holy. One of the most hurtful things and dynamics someone can pull in a conflict is to take it to someone that you're friends with, or to take it to someone that you see as an authority, or to take it to someone that you see is someone that you care about, someone that you're involved in some way, or to publicly take the conflict and to manipulate the situation to get that person on your side. It can be so damaging, especially when there's multiple people involved. It can be far more traumatizing to a person. Okay, so now we are going to talk about some ways to get into unity consciousness so that we can work things out, and that we can build a bridge, and that we can create resolution. And number one is that both parties have to be willing to do that. So how do we do this? How do we have a safe, loving unity resolution? You gotta have understanding for both parties. You gotta allow a space of emotional processing. So you're either emotionally processing in a contained way with the other person, going through the anger, the fear, the blame, the guilt, all of it, or you allow yourself to take a step back and to do that in your own time, of your own accord, where you're processing. So you need to have an emotional processing. You need to be able to take a step back in the situation. The conversation needs to be not about who's right and who's wrong, but about both of us coming to resolution, no matter who did what. To not enable anyone and to take full responsibility in both parties. Whenever you're expressing what the other person did to you, you need to be careful that when you're doing that, you're not labeling them as bad and you're not approaching them like they're wrong, but you're just saying, this is how I felt, this is how your actions have impacted me, and this is what I would like in the future, and this is what I would like to form resolution for you here and now. It is super, super, super important that when you're expressing how someone has hurt you, that you processed your emotions enough that you can approach them in a loving, understanding way. Understanding means understanding their trauma, and it means having complete compassion for them in the situation, and it means that you're coming to a place of working things out where you're like past needing to put blame on them, and you're ready to form a new relationship, a new way of doing things, and to just let things go. To receive things in the same way, to receive things with, I know that I was coming from this place of trauma and I'm sorry to have hurt you, right? And to just have understanding for both people's trauma, to take responsibility to do the work on both people's trauma. And from there, you want to find a middle ground. So let's talk about a middle ground. Usually a conflict has to do with a need that was missing, a communication that was not processed properly. And so a middle ground would be, once we can figure out on both sides what the missing need was, what the missing understanding was for the other person, right? And then we can put both of those two together objectively. Now, an example of a missing need could be, one person's need is to have independence and to not always be in a space to drop everything for the other person, but to be allowed to have that independence and that backing away and not always be in like this like lovey kind of space with them. Now, an opposing need to that would be someone who maybe really, really, really needs a reassurance and a security. Let's say this person needs I love yous and kisses every time they leave the room or every time they go to work or leave the house. So what is a middle ground there? Is that one person needs to have more understanding for that person's need of independence and not always feeling super lovey-dovey, and the other person needs to have understanding for that person's need for attachment, for security, and to give them that security, and then to allow the other person to give them space afterward, to not make the either person wrong for their needs. Now, what happens if we come to needs that are incompatible? We can involve other people in meeting our needs instead of that one person, or we can change how the relationship might be set up to accommodate for those incompatible needs. A relationship can always change. It doesn't have to stay with the same identity. We can always move course. How do we incorporate conflict resolution into an intentional community setting? One of the most important dynamics for an intentional community is to have some leadership, right? There has to be someone that is willing to always come to get everybody together and to create some structure for the group, right? Someone that has the best interest at the group and has natural leadership skills. This person has to be a good mediator. They have to be really, really, really good about accommodating multiple perspectives and to be able to see someone's pain without demonizing the other person. They have to be able to have such an endurance when it comes to someone being triggered and saying the wrong thing and projecting onto them, that they can maintain and hold their power in this situation no matter what is said or no matter how that person pushes them. They need to be able to spot a victim control dynamic when a victim is trying to control a situation through being poor me. Whenever it comes to someone who's being super, super interrogative or super intimidative, right? So that's someone who's approaching a situation with attack and dominance. There always needs to be, the first reaction is silence, is seeing that person, saying, I see you're mad right now, right? But showing silence at the same time that says, this is not okay, I'm not going to accept this, I'm not going to continue to accept this, I'm not going to play into this. And when they're in a less emotionally charged state, you can say, look, Right now, you're in fight mode. Right now, you're in I'm wrong versus right mode. You need to go take some time to yourself and come back when you're in a space to accommodate other people and accommodate to understand other people, and just take some time to yourself until you're ready to find resolution here and to step up and take responsibility no matter how uncomfortable it is. And from there, the leader says, I'm waiting for you to do that. I give you permission to go and do that. And, they're able to cut things off and end things before they get emotionally charged and before there's any kind of attack going on, right? You always want to step away from situations when it comes to, instead of talking or emotionally processing, the emotions are being directed and blamed and projected and thrown at the other person from an emotionally charged place, right? This is a kind of a reaction that can happen to everybody, and anybody can get into that place, right? And that's why it's important to hold each other accountable, to calm things down and come back together after things have been emotionally processed, to really show the other person your point of view, right? To really help come to a common objective point of view and really seeing and understanding all parties involved. When it comes to intentional community, it's super important to have your leader and your mission and your organization around that community, to have someone that has a no BS tolerance limit. This is somebody who is a wall. They are a sergeant that is dedicated and will not leave the mission no matter what, till death do us part. This is somebody who is not going to be manipulated, and this is somebody who will always, always, always hold their power, right? And they will be able to approach people that are acting up or in a you're right versus wrong kind of ego space from a place of, look, I see you, I don't want to make you wrong here, I completely understand your perspective, and I just want to share that, this is the other perspective involved, and this is the responsibility you need to take, and this is what needs to happen from here, right? And no matter how much fighting is going on from the other person, they can hold their ground, their power, until that other person is ready to drop their swords to stop fighting. But you have to approach them from a place of love, from a place of understanding, and you have to approach them from a place where you're also not laying up swords or defenses or shields against them, because people are not going to be ready to drop their shields and swords until you do first. If you like this video and you want more videos, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. Hit the bell, the notification button to get more videos like this. I work on a variety of topics, everywhere from psychic stuff to shamanism to emotional stuff to relationships. I work on topics like self-love, health. I work on helping people come into their power, becoming leaders, entering their heart space, and I am a certified completion process practitioner, parts work practitioner, and heart space coach and extrasensory. If you want to find out more about any one of these things that are mentioned, please comment below. A little quick understanding of the completion process is it's a process that was created by Teal Swan, and it works with childhood resolution and trauma resolution. So that'll be it for today. Thanks so much for joining me, guys. Find out more about me on blushheartsblossoming.com.